All right, Heather, A through Z.
T.
T. What the fuck starts with T? Nothing. There are no words in the English language that start with T. Ignore the ones I just said.
None start with T.
None.
Maybe T is just like, spill the tea of whatever news you have.
No, that's too close to the fact that I've got hot tea next to me. I don't want to spill it. I want to drink it. I don't understand the expression spilling the tea. I'd much rather drink the tea. Yeah. Why do people want to spill it? It's a delicious hot beverage or cold beverage. It's a delicious beverage. Why are people willy-nilly just running around spilling tea? I don't get it, and I don't like it.
So we will never be using that expression on this podcast.
Never.
Ever again.
No.
Got it.
I mean, there are a few things that start with T. I just don't know if they're really like podcast friendly or this podcast friendly. I mean, we could talk about the congressional hearing into TikTok. We could talk about the Tennessee state government expelling 3 of their members. Or I'm sorry, expelling 2 of their members and not expelling one of them by one person. And it being incredibly odd that, you know, it's the 2 black men are the one expelled and the white woman's not. Yeah, very weird.
But they're probably like, but it's a woman, so.
No, well, the funny thing is they actually can still come back. Like they were expelled. So essentially their seat gets, depending on the county's rules, will get like a temporary seat, which in Nashville, which is one of them, he might just be the temporary assignee to it. And then they go back up for re-election. There's nothing barring them from running again. So there's a very good chance that both of these young men might be able to, I don't know, do it again. As a big just fuck you to all of them. I totally get it. Let's see, what else? I'm pretty excited about the Apple TV musical Schmigadoon season 2 started. I'm excited about that.
Yep. I am excited to start watching that. The first season was really good. And
the world theme of this can thank me for that. Because I think I was the first person I know that watched it. And was like, hey, everybody, you should watch Schmigadoon. It's really good.
And that's why they have a season 2. That right there.
Yeah, and 2 starts with a T. Ted Lasso season 3 is going. That's a thing. I'm very tired right now, if you can tell by my eyes being more like bagged under than normal. That's a thing. So that's another one. That's all the tea stuff I got.
I think that's a good amount of teas. I appreciated those. The information given to me.
So I found out today, and this could have been common knowledge before, I don't know, or maybe people just didn't realize this. Do you remember when they did that 30-year anniversary of Woodstock in 1999?
Yeah.
And it went very poorly. Like, people died and...
Yep.
Yeah, all that stuff. James Brown was the first act.
Really?
Yeah, it's mainly known for, like, Limp Bizkit and Korn and Metallica and Red Hot Chili Peppers and Insane Clown Posse, like all that crazy shit. James Brown's the one that started it. Was the opening act of that show.
I don't remember that. Yeah.
I don't think anybody does.
Interesting.
What else? I don't know. That's all I got, really. I did not plan this out that well today. Not that I can plan it out any like that much better, because I give you guys now 26 options of things to choose from. And I try to match my thing with what you guys say outside of or like first 6 letters or whatever it is. Yeah, I got nothing. I've got nothing. Yeah.
Now I do have a question that sort of, well, definitely relates to the topic of our movie today. And my question for you is, are you a D&D player?
I have played it. I have played it. I wouldn't be opposed to playing it again. But I am a big fan of watching people play D&D. I don't necessarily play it myself. Like I said, I have played it. I would play it again, I suppose. I do love watching people play it. I think that's incredibly fascinating, especially like when they're really good players or you've got like a really good GM or DM. Yeah, that can be very fun. I very much enjoy that. I think I would be a better D&D player now, having watched like good people play the game.
You know more like what to do and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I'd probably still make a bunch of dumb mistakes, and I'd probably still make a bunch of dumb things. Like I'd try to do dumb things. But that's just kind of how I play. But I am fascinated with the idea of D&D and the lore of D&D and a lot of that stuff. I do have a version of Clue that is D&D themed Clue.
That's pretty cool, actually.
And the characters, you know, like instead of it being like Colonel Mustard and this and that, like it's different characters, and they have special abilities because it's like more akin to D&D. So
yeah,
that's a pretty fun little game. Yeah, that's all I got right now.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of, you know, D&D and people playing it and stuff. I've never played it. And
shocking.
Really,
I thought you would have been the biggest D&D nerd of the podcast.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. But like, and the funny thing is too, my most like deep dive, if you will, into the lore of it was honestly Stranger Things season 4, which doesn't really go into the lore of it, but just that as much as they talk about it and actually seeing them play the game and whatever. I guess maybe just all of Stranger Things because they play D&D like the other seasons too. But
I was about to say, what about seasons like 1 through 3 when they're constantly referencing D&D?
That's fair. But just because they had, you know, like the main bad guy is a D&D character and stuff like that. But I didn't know.
Named after a D&D character.
Or named after.
But at the same time, all of them are. The Demigorgon is, the Mind Flayer is.
True.
Those are creatures in D&D.
Yeah, that's fair. I forgot about that for some reason. But yeah, so before that show, like I didn't know really anything about Dungeons and Dragons as far as like what's in them or how you even play or anything.
I like how you just said what's in them. Like what's in what?
What's in the game? Like that there's the monsters and the, you know, all those things.
I thought you were talking about like in the box or something. And I'm like, it's not that type of game. I was going to break your heart a little bit.
No. I just mean like what types of, you know, characters or monsters or creatures are in the game at all. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of my first really kind of knowledge or insight into anything related to it other than just hearing the name D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. But it's just interesting too. I know we'll go into it with what we talk about today, but just the difference of like what Dungeons and Dragons is like in this movie versus Stranger Things. Like just the whole feel of it is completely different. So it just, I don't know. It just seems like a lot more of like a fun kind of game now.
We'll get more into this later. But I do think that that's one of the biggest misconceptions about D&D is it is unbelievably silly. It is a silly, silly game.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that it can be bonkers. It can also be very emotional and very serious and all these other things, but it can also be just downright silly.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of one of the things that's kind of lost on people is that it's not as much as it can be about the monsters and the fighting and the magic and all that shit. It's more about the people playing it. Like that is what D&D is the most about. And if you've got a bunch of silly people, you're going to get a silly game. I mean,
yeah,
it's what it is, And there's like a reason why, like, there's always like surprising people that like are big into D&D. Like people are surprised that like Vin Diesel, super into D&D. Joe Minglanello, I probably butchered his name. No, super into D&D. That guy hosts like celebrity D&D games. He has a custom
nice.
D&D table at his house. It's like a big, like custom made wooden and acrylic table to play on with other celebrities. Then even in this, like, that was one of those things that, like, one of the things getting ready for this movie, and this isn't a spoiler or anything, like, the whole cast, like, sat down and played D&D with one of the directors being the DM for that game. And, so
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's one of those things it really is the people around you make the game what it is. If you're a bunch of serious people, you're going to have a very serious game. If you're a bunch of just silly asshats, you're just going to have a silly, stupid game. And that's fine as long as that's what you want, And there's infinite ways to like customize it too. Like there are some campaigns and people that, you're not like it's D&D and they're playing it based on D&D's rules and all this other stuff. But the campaign's in outer space. And it's spaceships and robots and, all that shit. So, yeah. I mean, that's the thing about it is what you make it. And I think that says a lot about what we're going to talk about tonight with it, because
yeah,
I think that that's what surprised people in this. So we'll discuss it. I wonder if Justin's ever played D&D.
Yeah, I'm curious about
that
too,
I don't think
actually.
he has. But see, like, yeah.
I think he owes people money today.
No, because he was on the last one. It was just for the last one.
Okay. It's not every time.
Yes, it's not every time he misses one. It's just if he starts missing too many in a row, then he has to pay the Cinefans. No, yeah, I never completely got into D&D. When I was younger, I got into Magic first, Magic the Gathering, which they are kind of sister things now. They're owned by the same company. They've had D&D. They've had like a D&D set in Magic, where like the creatures and the spells and the artifacts and a lot of that stuff were from D&D. They even share some locations and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean,
that's cool.
That wasn't my favorite of sets for Magic, just because for it being D&D heavy, they had very little goblins in it. Or not as good of goblins as I would have wanted. They did have Den of the Bugbear, which is a land that's very useful in a goblin deck. I don't run it personally because it doesn't fit my style of goblin deck. But Den of the Bugbear is a very good goblin land card. If anybody doesn't know, a bugbear is a goblin. So I know it doesn't sound like it because it's a bugbear, but a bugbear is a goblin.
Okay.
It's a type of goblin, I should say. You ready to talk about the movie now? To actually talk about the movie now?
Yes.
Here we go.
Somebody will listen to me.
Nobody knows anything but you.
All right. Are you ready?
Yes.
Come on.
Cinema Slayers.
Hey, Cinefans, and welcome back to another episode of the Cinema Slayers podcast. I'm Sterling, and as always, I'm joined by just Heather. No Justin tonight. And we are going to talk about what we liked and didn't like and everything in between with the movie D&D, or Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves. We will go spoiler-free recommendations and scores, and then into a more spoiler-centric section, with time codes in the description to allow you to jump around in the podcast and or YouTube video if you so require. I look so ragged for this YouTube video. I apologize
No,
to YouTube.
you don't.
I apologize, Google or Alphabet, or the fuck you want to be called. I look so ragged tonight. I'm very tired. I think it shows on my face. My normally very squinty eyes look extra squinty tonight. And I have very deep bags under my eyes. So, which is kind of a comment. I don't get a lot of sleep, but I don't know. I'm just very ragged
Maybe
today.
you just feel you're tired more today.
Oh, I
Like,
see
you
it in my
feel how
eyeballs.
tired
I'm
you
looking
are.
at my eyeballs on the computer screen right now. They look ragged. My beard
I don't
wasn't
think they
playing
look
well
that
today. It's a fucking mess. Looks like a bird's nest.
It does not.
My forehead looks exceptionally shiny. It's not that shiny. It's not, I promise. But it looks fairly shiny. Like my face is just washed the fuck out tonight. I don't know what the deal is.
I honestly just thought that it was something with the lighting.
It is, but it doesn't help that my face is helping it.
It doesn't help that your face is helping it. I like that.
Yeah, my face is helping me be washed out. Yeah, I look ragged as fuck. Sorry, YouTube. If you cannot stand to look at my face tonight, I totally get it. Just go listen to the audio only. It's fine. You won't offend me. You can jump in the comments and go, thanks for suggesting going to the audio only, Sterling, because you did look ragged. I'd go, yeah, I get it. It's fair. That is a fair assessment of what the fuck is going on tonight.
Oh boy.
I know it typically helps when both you and Justin are on, because then like my screen is smaller. So I would have really benefited from Justin being here tonight because I wouldn't have taken so much of the screen. But nope. Justin had to let all the Cinefans down and make me slightly more prevalent in the video, looking wretched. I hope you're happy, Justin. I hope, the WWE calling you and working SmackDown and NXT and both nights of WrestleMania and Raw was worth it.
Yeah.
I hope it was worth it to all the Cinefans out there, to all the little boys and girls that gather around their computer screens on Thursday mornings to watch our YouTube videos. I hope it was worth it for you, Justin, to disappoint all of them by making my mess of a face bigger tonight. Anyway, Heather, what are your spoiler-free thoughts about D&D?
Honestly, I had a lot of fun with this movie. I definitely had more fun than I expected to. Not to say that I thought it was going to be a bad movie, but again, not really having a ton of context about D&D or anything like that. I I was like, okay, might be good. We'll see. But honestly, this was so good. Like, I really just enjoyed everything they did with this movie. And it actually, I mean, it kind of a little bit of what we were talking about before. Like, I feel like it encapsulates a lot of the fun parts and the magic parts and the fantasy parts all really well in this movie. So I just really appreciate the way that it all came together, because it made me honestly be like, man, D&D seems like it'd be fun. If this is kind of like a story, standard kind of story that you might get from it, I'm in. Like, this sounds like it could be a really fun game. I liked all of the characters. I think they really had great characters that really played off of each other well. And honestly, there were actually parts of this that were oddly more emotional than I thought too. So I guess that kind of tracks with what you said about how sometimes these games can be emotional. So yeah, there was just moments that were very like heartfelt. And I think that was part of it too. Like, this movie had a lot of heart to it as well. And I think that helps drive this movie working as well as it does with all of the other elements they put into it. So it was a blast. It was a lot of fun. Like, it just really was much more than I expected it to be. But again, I guess with the cast that they had, I shouldn't have necessarily thought that. I enjoyed everybody that they put in this movie, and I like how the story progressed. I don't feel like it was overly long. Don't feel like it was slow paced or anything like that. They actually had some very genuinely funny moments as well. And yeah, it was just a really good, well done movie. Like, from beginning to end, I was just like, this was just a fun ride. Like, I just really enjoyed everything about that. I would watch it again. Like, it's just a really good movie.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's fair. I mean, I really think that they kind of hit the notes they need to hit. It was fairly funny. They, it had some emotional moments to it that I think were necessary. I think they kept some of the things hidden. I liked the way they played into the magic of it all and some of the lore. They weren't completely just Easter egg, like name dropping heavy stuff, So I think they did strike a good balance with that, whilst also being like true to what people want with it, because if you ever watched the original Dungeons and Dragons movie, it's garbage. It's very bad.
I remember hearing that too. Maybe that's why I wasn't that as excited as I should have been for this one.
It just has some shit in it. They're like, hey, Dungeons and Dragons, we're going to show a dungeon and we're going to have some dragons. That's all that matters. And with it, like, they try to make it so many things that it's not. There's no cohesiveness. There's no charisma. There's no charm. There's no nothing other than Jeremy Irons overacting every fucking scene he's in. And I'm all for that, because Jeremy Irons overacting is better than most people just regular acting. And so he just chews up every scene he's in. And it's fantastic. It's just, he's the only thing that feels like it's doing anything in that entire movie. This isn't that movie. This one does a really good job of things. It shows the differences in characters. Like, you get to see the difference between a sorcerer and a wizard, a barbarian and a bard and a druid and a paladin and a rogue. You get to see the differences. Each of the people play into it differently. And that adds a lot of style and flair to this. They do so many things practically, which I think helps some aspects of the movie feel a little bit more like based in things. And they just kind of really tried to make it feel like a full-fledged world. You just randomly get shots of like things like just characters in the background and all these little things. You get to see, one of the directors was talking about that, like, some of the words that are like written on like doors and all these things that are in like D&D languages and stuff like that. Apparently they're accurate. Like,
Really?
if it's like do not enter, but it's written in another language, it still says do not enter. You know, so they got, you know, really in depth with a lot of those things. I mean, some of that might be to its detriment. While this movie is financially doing fairly well, this was a very expensive movie. And that's what worries me about it. Because I think overall, if you're going to make a D&D movie and you want one to kind of set a tone for what the rest of them can be, I think this was a very good effort in doing that. I think that this is the type of movie that might get just enough interest to where if they do a second one, maybe they can even go bigger or bolder or do crazier D&D shit with it. Because they set this as the foundation.
Yeah.
And I, you know, as much as it gets into lore and like all these little things, I think it's very easy to follow. Even if you're not a D&D person, like I think if you're a D&D person, you might get a little extra out of it with some of the little nods and things that they have in this. But I think if you're not a D&D person, it's a very easy movie to follow. And I think that helps it be enjoyable and accessible in a lot of ways to just a lot of things that I think D&D might drive people away because they might not think it's accessible. Whereas this is a very accessible movie.
And see, that was one thing I was going to be curious about going into this recording, because we're coming from different ends of the spectrum here as far as, I guess, what we know about Dungeons and Dragons. So you're right, because I could say from my experience of not knowing D&D and the lore and how it works and all of that, this was easy to follow. And it was still a fun adventure for me coming from the outside, have never really not having much knowledge of what D&D is. So I do agree with that. And you're right. I do love how each of the characters really played a different part in this. And you see the importance of each type of character in it, which was really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there were some other characters that were in this, I think that should have been utilized a little more. But I think that they did a very good job of really kind of subscribing to the idea of the adventuring party, which is like your D&D thing. It's the adventuring party. And while you want some variety, you want people that can do this and that, and people to have different skills. You know, you might be able to like max out and kill bosses if you've got 6 paladins going and destroying everything. But then, you know, if you've got a good DM, he's going to put a boss you can't fucking touch. Then your paladins are useless and you're going to wish everything was diversified. And I think that was a very good way of representing things in this. By showing that having a variety and having different, you know, types of characters and all this other stuff, how that can add depth and success and all those things to something like this. Because like the other one, it's like you've got like 2 thieves, a mage, which that's also very old hat D&D, calling things mages, and like a dwarf and an elf. And like, but they don't do anything that's like crazy anything. You know what I mean? Like, you know, there's nothing very much unique about the dwarf that's like dwarven. Like, they don't really even get into the classes. Like, the elf in that would be a ranger. She should be an elven ranger. I think the dwarf, I want to say they're thinking of him as the barbarian. That really doesn't play completely well. And so they just kind of lacklusterly kind of go through things, and they don't really show any utility in being different in that. And that's kind of the great thing about D&D is there's utility in being different. You know, the different races and different classes and all those things, they add things to it, because while the what's her name's character is a druid in this, she's also a tiefling druid. So while they might not have lent so much into her being a tiefling, there's lots of benefits of being a tiefling, or things that can make her different than like an elven druid or some other type of creature being a druid. And the one thing that they kind of added with her being a tiefling is there's a scene where she uses her tail to move something. And that's something tieflings can do if they have a tail. They have the prehensile tail and all that stuff. And that's nice, that they added that. But it's one of those things that maybe in a second movie or something like that, they can really go deeper into it of what makes her version of a druid different because she's a tiefling. I don't know if they said what Justice Smith's character was. He might be just half elf. I think he's something.
Specified.
He's not human. Well, he's not completely human. He's, I think, at least half elf because he's got pointy ears. I don't think it said what's his name? Zoc or something like that. The paladin character. I don't remember what he is. But that's neither here nor there. He's a paladin
with a Z.
Well, his name starts with an X, I thought. It sounds like a Z, but it starts with an X.
You might be right, actually.
But I don't think they said what he was. He's like Thraci, I think. But that's a region. It's not what he is.
Simon, who is Justice Smith's character, is a half-elf sorcerer.
Yeah. Nailed it.
Good job.
Most of the characters are human. Like Holga and Edgin and Zenk.
Zank, I think it was, right?
Yeah. It's Xenk.
Yeah, okay.
Also, his name's pronounced like Reggie. Or Reggae, or something like that.
Yeah, it's like Reggae Jean Page or something like that.
Yeah, it blew my mind. He sounds so British. When Americans say his actual name, I'm like, it's nowhere near as fancy.
Yeah.
But I really liked overall the tone and the vibe of this movie. Is it like a perfect movie? No, but it's a good fun time. I mean, it's more of a fun time than any of the fucking superhero movies we've gotten lately.
Literally, I had the same thought. I was like, this is a way more fun action adventure film than any that we've seen in the past few months.
Yeah. And, it's swords and dragons and shit.
Yeah.
So, recommendations and scores?
Yeah.
Recommendations and score.
Go.
Yeah, I do recommend this because you also, if you're like me, you don't really have any prior knowledge really of the D&D world, and it was still a really fun time for me. So I think that whether you are or not into D&D, you will enjoy this movie. It's a great action adventure film. They have really good characters. I feel like each character gets a chance to kind of shine a little bit, and you get a little bit of them being fleshed out in different ways, which is really cool. You get to see them working together a lot to solve some things, and that's really fun to see it unfold. You get a heartwarming story in there as well about, so many different, there's a lot of different themes and undertones of this film as well, but they do it in a very lighthearted way for the most part. They have this lighthearted, fun feel to it. But it seems to me like they're really trying to capture the essence of bringing you into this world that, they've created for us. And, they just really draw you in with that. And yeah, I just think the story was compelling. I think the characters were even more compelling. And yeah, it just kind of like what I said at the beginning too. Like it's oddly an emotional film in some ways that I just didn't expect. But yeah, it's definitely not a flawless film by any means, but none of the things that I would consider a flaw or whatever kept me from enjoying anything about this film. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth watching and I think you're going to have a good time with it. I'm going to give it, I think I'm going to give it 85 unexpected Bradley Cooper cameos out of 100.
Oh, you went there with it.
I did. Yeah.
I didn't know we were going to drop the BC this early.
Hey, listen.
I do want to know how the fuck he ended up in this. Like, I want to know, did they just ask him, like, you know, like, or was he just on the lot, or it's just crazy.
I know.
He's randomly in it. I think that this, yeah, it's a very fun movie. It's, you know, it's fairly lighthearted. It does hit some more serious emotional beats here and there, but like overall, if you're looking for just a movie to go and have fun with and to just take 2 hours off and just have a good time, and this is kind of that movie. You know, this isn't something like John Wick where it's a culmination and it's just, I don't want to say in your face the whole time. This is just a movie that's just a nice, relaxing, fun movie watch, which this is the season for. Like, this is when you're starting to gear up for summer movies and all this other stuff. And this is kind of that tone setter to get you ready for that type of film. And there's a lot of depth in this movie. Like I said, you randomly, there's some scenes with was it Tabaxi in the background? Those are the cat people, the ones that look like cats. There's a very fun scene with the Arakakra, which is the bird people. And then there's, you know, some Dragonborns in there, you know, which are human dragon hybrid characters. So, you know, they're all done practically and it's very fun with it. And then you'll see some in the background, some are more prevalent, and, you know, they're just kind of there, and it just kind of helps build a world that has a bunch of depth to it that is also just still very approachable. Like, they just kind of throw you into this world, but it's not like they throw you into the deep end. They very much let you get acclimated before they really start expanding a little bit more. And I think they did that in a very smart way. I'll give it an 80. This is an 80 stylized dragon ampersands out of 100. That's what it is, right? The ampersand, little at and symbol thing, right? That's what it's called. The ampersand.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I actually didn't realize what it was called, but it sounds familiar now that you say it. Something like that.
And in D&D, that's like the whole dragon little thing. So,
yeah. I also really think the visuals in this were really awesome. Some of the shots they did were really cool.
Yeah. We'll talk about it. We'll get there. I've got to say the Cinescore.
Yeah, I know. I meant to say that in my quick overview and I forgot to.
It's too late, Heather. It is too late. You can never talk about the visuals again.
I know.
Cinescore, official Cinescore for this movie, 83.
Cool.
Spoilers?
I approve. Yeah.
Spoilers.
You did kind of give away like one of the two big spoilers, which is just Bradley Cooper is just in this movie, just out of nowhere. Bradley Cooper.
It was delightful, but weird.
Playing a halfling, which halflings in D&D are very much hobbits. Like, they're hobbits. They can't use the word hobbits, so they're halflings. They're just little people that are like half the size of other people. And so
this is inspired by like Lord of the Rings type of
no
things. Oh, okay.
It's like a fantasy creature.
Okay.
They
'Cause
wanted-
you said they
yeah.
couldn't use the word hobbit, so I thought that meant
Well,
you
yeah.
want to do something. Yeah.
Well, it's just like they're trying to add more creatures and they're trying to add things. And I mean, ultimately, at some point, it's been used by something, you know?
I see what you're saying.
And
Okay.
so they didn't necessarily, they wanted to use hobbits as a creature,
Yeah.
not necessarily inspired
Okay.
by Lord of the Rings. They just wanted to have hobbits in it.
Right.
But
Okay.
they couldn't, so they have halflings. Which that's kind of the weird, kind of like very on point D&D joke. Like with Helga, she's just, you know, big, strong barbarian woman. Of course, she's going to be into halflings.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the joke in there. And yeah, Bradley Cooper's just in it. And I think the other really big kind of twist thing was with their Eric Cockle at the beginning. Or Eric Cockra? Yeah, Eric Cockra at the beginning of this. Because, you know, the whole thing when they're like essentially at a parole hearing and they're like, oh, we're waiting on this guy. They're waiting on this guy. It's all because he's in Eric Cockra. And they want to just grab him and run out the window and have him hopefully fly them a little bit so they don't die.
Yeah.
Very solid joke.
Mm-hmm.
Also very solid that he's like, but we were going to pardon you.
Yeah.
Like they were
That
going to
was
get
funny.
it anyway. And so I thought that was really great. I'm glad they did not give
Yeah.
that away in the trailer. They gave away some of the jokes in the trailer. I'm glad that was not one of them. Because that was a very, very solid joke. I think it really kind of like helped set the tone for what this was going to be.
Yeah.
You know, because like there are some D&D people on this planet, if you will, very upset by some of the ideas in this trailer.
Really?
So what's her name? The druid turning into an owlbear.
Mm-hmm.
Druids, I believe that's the ability wild shape. They typically can't turn into anything as big or powerful or any of that stuff that what an owlbear is. They typically, that is not a thing. And so like the fact that in the trailer, they're just like, oh, she's turning into a fucking owlbear. A lot of people were mad about it. But I want to say the literal first rule of D&D. It might be the literal one, or it might just be figuratively, like they're like, oh, the first rule. Ultimately, it's whatever the dungeon master allows, or your DM or your GM, whatever you want to call them or call them. It's whatever they allow. If they want to allow your druid to turn into an owlbear, your druid can turn into an owlbear.
Okay.
You know, nobody's 100% a rules lawyer about everything. I shouldn't say nobody. I guarantee there are some rules lawyers out there. They're like, no,
Yeah.
with the amount of gear they were carrying, they should have only had a walking speed of this. Like, there's calculations and everything and ways to figure out like how far your character can jump, how high they can jump, how long it would take them to walk from point A to point B with this amount of gear and supplies. Like those are all things you can calculate and do in D&D. Some people don't because like that's a little too tedious. You know, there's some things like there's a spell that'll just like make a bunch of food for you, but then it also allows you to it also cleans the kitchen for you. That's actually written into the spell because some dungeon masters might be out there being like, nope, you can't go anywhere yet. You have to clean the kitchen. Roll a dice to see how well you clean. Like, and nobody wants to deal with that. Or I said, like, you know, like that's not the type of stuff you want in this. And like they wanted to have like fun and they wanted to show crazy shit in this movie. And that's kind of how you do it. You know? And
yeah,
I mean, to me, it was kind of just like this movie is fairly par for the course for a lot of the movie. One of the things I was really kind of glad they showed was just like how stupid crazy like the end of a boss battle can be. Like they did all that shit.
Oh, yeah.
And, she's like doing that time spell and they had like a plan for it. And they're like, oh no, he did counterspell it. Like he was prepped, he was ready, he practiced. This kind of the whole leveling up, getting better at your spells or having a higher level spell or any of that stuff. And then just the fact that they just went ape shit ballistic. And then there was the owlbear just like doing a whole Loki thing of just smashing her 9 billion times into the fucking ground, throwing her up against the wall in a building. They go like, okay, it's done. And then just going again at it. Because like in D&D, one of the most common things to happen when you're like fighting a boss and it's like, you're fighting the boss, you're fighting the boss. And then it's like, because you don't really know how many hit points the boss has left. That's not something you traditionally know. You might ask your dungeon master how they're looking or use insight to glean how they look to maybe guess if they're close to being killed or whatever. But typically when you end up doing an attack that will ultimately kill the boss, the DM typically says something like, okay, what do you do? More or less going, hey, you're now going to describe how you kill this boss or how you kill this thing. And that kind of like played out to me like something like that happening of like if a druid was an owlbear and then the DM goes, hey, what do you do? More or less saying, you're going to kill him. Describe what you do. And so you always go apeshit with it. You can go as like elaborate and crazy as you want. None of it really matters because you're just saying what you did to kill,
Okay.
So even if within the realm of the game, you just did one sword slash and that's what killed them. That was enough hit points. It's more or less like, hey, tell me how you killed them. So like, yeah, you're like, I did a front flip over them and I stabbed them in the back. And then I did another front flip and I was in front of them and I poked them in the eye with it. Like you can go, you can just go crazy with it because you're just describing the end of something. And that's how I kind of felt it was with that red mage. They were just like, or the red wizard. They were just like, oh, if you were an owlbear and like you were you were a person playing as a tiefling druid that could wild shape into an owlbear, what would you do?
Right. Yeah.
And that very much felt like it because it's fucking crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Just all kinds of slamming them into the ground over and over again,
Right.
So like I really kind of appreciated that aspect of it. And then I really kind of liked one of the things of it's a very common thing in D&D. And a lot of some of the campaigns I've watched people do or something like that, when there's always something to resurrect somebody or they're going to get that item to resurrect somebody, 9 times out of 10, it's almost like you've got to end up using it on someone else. Because
I figured that was going to happen too.
I just like the way they did it. Like, because it very much makes sense for the movie that like that little girl never knew her mother.
Yeah.
Her mother, for all intents and purposes, was Michelle Rodriguez's character, was Helga.
Yeah.
That was her mom. That's the motherly figure she grew up with. That was that role in her life.
Yeah.
So while
I loved that part. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Chris Pine's character was all about trying to resurrect his wife and all that other stuff. Like he missed that he didn't have to go on that, that raid to begin with. He didn't have to go try to steal that amulet because that's never what his daughter wanted. That's her life as far as she was seeing it. She had 2 parents.
And I also love that there is a part in the movie where he talks about that with her, or when he thinks it's her anyway. And he's like, I wasn't trying to, bring back your mom. I was trying to bring back my wife, basically. Like, I loved that honest moment of like him being vulnerable with that and true about that, because it would be so easy to just be like, well, yeah, like you need your mom. Of course I want to bring her back. But he's like, no, this is actually selfishly for me because I just miss her,
Yeah, I mean, I really like the way they played that through,
Yeah, that was good.
And with this all too, like, I was kind of sad to see our paladin was only there for a little bit.
He was so great. I really enjoyed his character. Yeah.
But I get why. It's the same reason why in so many X-Men movies, Professor X gets incapacitated. Because like Professor X would be able to solve 90% of your problems.
Right.
It's like, oh, I'll just turn off their brains.
Yeah.
No more fight. He solves more of your problems than not. So they always have to incapacitate him somehow, like to make it where he's not a part of the action. And that's why in this, if he was there, would like detect good and evil and all the things that a paladin can do. Yeah, he would have helped fuck up that Red Wizard. Or that tournament thing that they were in. All those things. Like, he would have fucked all of it up.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, they take him out of it to avoid, to actually add some stakes. It's just, he was such a nice addition to the adventuring party.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, it would have just been too easy, though.
Yeah. I mean, because he works when you're fighting a dragon. Like, which that was a fun dragon. I like the fact that they didn't go with the stereotypical dragon there.
I thought that same thing. I was like, oh, this is like different,
And that is an actual dragon in D&D. Like,
oh, is it?
Yeah, that is an actual dragon. Like,
nice.
So is the dragon in one of the flashback scenes earlier. That black dragon that was shooting the black ooze everywhere. That's an actual dragon.
Yeah.
So I like the fact that they added that to it. I like the fact that the way they showed a difference between like a sorcerer and a wizard, I liked how they added those elements into it because there is a difference between the two. And I liked that they kind of added that, between Justice Smith's character and then the Red Wizard. Like the way they did magic was different, but then some of it was the same because magic is magic. Just how you approach magic is different. And, the one thing I do wish they added a little bit more from would be from Chris Pine's character. Like a bard can sometimes make or break like some campaigns. I mean, them just adding like bardic inspiration and some of the spells they can do and the way they can distract things and all of those, and having some healing magic and all those types of things. Like a bard is a very utilitarian type of character when you wouldn't think so. I mean, they're bards, but people can get insanely creative with a bard and really add to it. So I wish I had seen some of that stuff a little bit more. Like I wish that like somebody would be a little bit like when Justice Smith's character was kind of down on himself. I really wish that like him saying inspiring words to him would actually inspire him.
Right.
They imply it a little bit, when he's like, at the end when he's like, yeah, I thought that would work. And he's like, you said it would. Kind of like they went along with it because they said it would work. Like that's kind of like a bardic inspiration type of thing. But I just think I really kind of wish they maybe added, like, I don't want to say like a supernatural element to it, but just like a slightly magical element to his ability to give inspiration.
Yeah.
Even if it is like, false courage. Like, I really wish he was like really able to pump people up and, convince people of things. Like, I really just kind of wish they added a little bit more of that into it. Especially with him being a harper. I just wish they kind of added a little bit more of that aspect to it. But, I mean, in the end, if you're just going, well, Chris Pine is just charismatic as fuck. So we just kind of made it a Chris Pine character. I kind of get it.
Yeah, it worked.
There was one of those, one of the trailers or commercials they did where they kind of add a bunch of quotes from movie reviewers to be like, it's really good, watch it. You know, one of them was like, Chris Pine is the most Chris Pine he's been in a long time. I'm like, that's fair. I think it's the most Chris Pine he's been in a movie since either This Means War or one of the Star Trek movies. Which that also could be why I do love the movie This Means War. He's very Chris Piney in that movie, and I'm totally down for that.
Yeah, I can see that.
Well, yeah, it's kind of the same way with Star Trek. I mean, and I think that this is kind of, I don't want to equivocate two Chris Pine franchises with each other, but I like that this movie kind of did for D&D what his, Star Trek did for Star Trek, which is kind of just reintroduce it and be more accessible to a new crowd. I mean, that was one of my favorite things about it. I've been a Star Trek fan since I was a child, and I still really enjoyed this Star Trek, but I really liked that, like, because I saw that movie with Justin and our friend Devin, former person on this podcast, and we went, and it was like really nice that like they enjoyed it. Because they weren't really Star Trek fans. They had really never watched anything with Star Trek. They didn't really care about any of that stuff. I really liked the fact that now they had an in with Star Trek, just because it was cool. Like that re-accessibility that added. And I kind of feel like this movie does that with D&D, or the idea of D&D movies, at least.
I would definitely agree with that. Yeah.
And so I really appreciated that about it. And, I thought it was really funny. So many people have brought up Michelle Rodriguez when it comes to this movie. Like, I've talked to some people and they're like, hey, how was that movie? And I was like, oh, it was really good. They're like, but yeah, but how was Michelle Rodriguez? I'm like, oh, she was great. She was great in this. And they're like, oh, because I don't like her. I was just like, I don't get it. I don't know why. Like, I understand she's done like a lot of bad roles here and there, whatever. But like, I mean, she's fine enough as Letty in the, the Fast and the Furious franchise. So I don't know. I've never been as down, I guess, on Michelle Rodriguez as other people are. And I loved her in this movie. I thought she was fantastic. I thought she really kind of fit the barbarian type of character, whilst also being a very natural foil to the rambunctiousness that was Chris Pine.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because I actually I am one of those people that was like, I'm not the biggest Michelle Rodriguez fan. Like, I mean, I've seen her in a couple of other things. I did like Lost. And she was fine in that. But I mean, I think, I imagine her from like the Resident Evil movie. And then I think about her from, in the Fast and the Furious movies, like, I don't think she's the worst thing about them, but I just feel like her character is kind of one-dimensional when she shouldn't be in that movie, especially in the last one for sure. But in either case,
everyone was one-dimensional in that last one, though.
And that's why I say, that, like, I say especially that one, but also, yeah, like, that's not really saying much. I don't like hate her. She's not ever somebody that I'm like, I love her work. I think she's great. But all that to say, I am on that kind of train with her. And I thought she was amazing in this. This is probably my favorite role that she's been, to be honest. Like, I thought she was great. She actually was funny when she was supposed to be funny. She was like that serious, like, leader character when she was supposed to be that. She had those sentimental moments when she was supposed to. And yeah, she was a really great counterpart to Chris Pine's character. Like, I totally agree with you. I think she did a really, really good job in this movie. Like, I loved the pairing of her and Chris Pine in this a lot. So yeah, I am on that train. No offense, Michelle Rodriguez, but like, I kind of was on that train until this. And then I was like, okay, never mind. She was great.
Yeah, she was. I mean, I really liked the cast. I thought they all had fantastic chemistry.
Oh, yeah.
I've really enjoyed just seeing them doing all the promotional stuff for this, too, because they're all fantastic together. I've really enjoyed all that. And, it's really funny because like this movie has two writers, and the same two people directed it. And it's really just kind of funny because like one of the main guys really kind of promoting it as far as the director writing crew part of it goes is, he's been in a lot of shit people have seen. I mean, did you ever watch Freaks and Geeks?
No.
Well, because he was the main character in that.
Okay.
Did you ever watch Bones?
I have seen some of that, yes.
Well, he played like the FBI psychologist in that. What was his name? Sweets. He played Sweets in that.
Okay.
Did you ever see Waiting?
I did not.
Okay, I don't know how to help you then. But weirdly enough, they also wrote Spider-Man Homecoming.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they've also wrote a bunch of things. I think they wrote both the Horrible Bosses movies. They wrote the Vacation movie. They wrote Game Night.
Nice. That's a solid movie.
Yeah. The same writer, director, people of that did this. Yeah, and it just kind of like they're at least Tim, what's his name? John Francis Daly. Big D&D guy. He's, so I think that kind of helps having somebody that's actually like been a dungeon master before, also helping craft this. It's a lot of the same principles. He just had $150 million in professional actors to do it.
Yeah, right.
And he didn't have to roll any dice. So he could just tell the story he wants and doesn't have to have a shitty dice roll ruin the game.
There you
go. What are some more thoughts you had?
I mean, I think so. A couple of the aspects that were my favorite about this movie is, for one, just the teamwork and the dynamics of all the characters together, working together to say, okay, I'm going to do this to help with this part of the plan. You're going to do this. I really loved how well they all worked together, and you just see how important each of their characters is for the mission that they were on. I really liked that a lot. I really did. I agree with you. I liked Justice Smith's character a lot. Like and I always have liked Justice Smith and just the things I've seen him in. I just think he has like a very natural way about him that, like when he delivers lines and performances and stuff like that, he's just always very believable, and relatable. And I really like him. So I think, yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite parts of this movie is just that team dynamic that you get from them. And another thing is kind of, as I've mentioned, those sentimental moments. Like, I feel like they have a lot of heart behind this film, and in the sense of you get a lot of, who's really your family, and you get a lot of, believing in yourself, and what is it to actually fail, and what do we do when we fail, and, not giving up on yourself, and things like that are just really, important, like kind of deeper, profound messages that they worked into this movie really well. It doesn't feel like off-putting to put that in this film that is mostly pretty silly and just kind of action adventure-y. But, they really incorporated those messages well into the individual characters and into the overall story in this movie. And it was just really, I appreciated how much they were able to just balance the emotional and the profound moments with those fun, more lighthearted or action drawn moments. So that was the other thing about this movie that I really enjoyed. The whole thing about Holga basically being Kira. Is it Kira? I think that was her name. I think her name's Kira. Being her mom, basically, and just kind of seeing the montage of, all the things that she's helped her with throughout her life since she was a little girl. And I'm not remembering the little girl's name, but I love her too.
It is
everything
Kira.
I've seen her in. It is Kira. Okay.
Yeah, something like Kira.
Yeah. And the actress that plays her, everything I've seen her in, I just really enjoy her. And she was a little girl in Marry Me. She was a little girl in My Spy, I think. She was in something else more recently, but yeah, I just think she's a really a solid, actress in her roles. So yeah, I'm surprised with pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed all these characters too. And also, let's not forget Hugh Grant, because that man is a charming man every time you see him in any movie. He oozes charm and charisma no matter what type of character he's playing. I mean, he is essentially the villain in this movie, but he just has this way about him with his performances that you're just like, yep, that's very Hugh Grant of you to just be this charming, manipulative villain. And I loved how he played this very, I guess, like double crossing, two-faced. Yeah, a rogue. Okay. Manipulative guy. And yeah, I really, I've always, at least in more recent memory, thought that Hugh Grant was just a very charming, charismatic man in that. So he brought that to this role, and he had those funny moments as well, but also those moments of like, oh man, you're just completely evil. What are you doing? So yeah, I just, and the fact that he was just kind of what was he like, king or lord of something?
Lord of Neverwinter.
Lord of Neverwinter. And like, he's like, I don't really even care about that. I just want this money. Like, just like everything that he did and all the part that he played this entire, 2 years or however much time passed that he was this character, or that he was playing this part with people just to get what he eventually wanted in the end. It was just a really clever way to do that character. Yeah. And I do think like is it a paladin you said? Yeah. Regé-Jean Page.
Yeah.
That guy.
He was a paladin.
Yeah. Paladin. He was great too. Like he really should have been in it more, but I do get what you mean as far as like why he wasn't in more of the film. But every time he was on screen also, he just really was so captivating and just a really well done character too. My only thing is when they're in the dungeon and he's fighting off all those guys that eventually just end up coming back. And he's like, you can't, I mean, they're dead, so you can't actually just completely get rid of them. I was like, you just put a lot of effort into fighting them and lost your energy fighting them, and you knew they were coming back. I get that it was also a really awesome way to show his skill and fight those. And I loved actually the action scenes in this. I think that the fighting was really cool. All of that was great. But I was just like, oh no, like he invested all of that time into defeating them, and he knew they were going to come back, and that kind of sucks. But I just thought that was kind of funny that happened. But
see, the funny thing is, as a paladin, if anybody was to stop them from resurrecting, more often than not, it would be somebody like him. Paladins do have like some abilities and spells and whatnots that work great against undead or demons or any type of celestial type of creature.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I mean, but I enjoyed it because I liked watching the fight sequences that they did with it. And then there was something else that I was going to mention that I noticed was kind of like a flaw, but I can't remember now. But yeah, I do think Chris Pine was really just kind of the arc that you see him go through in this movie from beginning to end was really good too. And like you really feel for him and his whole like, no, if this plan doesn't work, we got to have this plan. You always have to have a plan, because if you don't have a plan, you fail. And his whole thing that he did with that was so great to me when he said something along the lines at one point of you're not really failing until you stop failing or something like that. And I was like, I like that. I really like that, where he's like, I'm still going to try. I know I fail a lot, but you got to keep trying. And I thought that was really a good way to do his whole bard thing and kind of rally the troops and kind of get their spirits up a little bit when he gave that speech. And it was just a very good moment in the movie as well. Yeah, I don't know. I think, and then Sophia Lillis, the druid, I think she came in clutch in a lot of scenarios. And she was also just very quick and very smart and okay, so if I can go in here and be this animal, I'm going to be able to do this and get this out. And she just, let me be the one that goes in and pulls everybody out because I could do this, just very quick on her feet. And I really liked her character a lot for that. So, man, they had a lot of really interesting adventures and just throughout the whole movie. I did really like the part when after they're with the paladin and he's leaving and he's just walking in the straight line. I thought that was one of my favorite parts when they're like, is he gonna go around the rock? Is he just gonna go straight through it? And he just kind of walks over that little rock and just keeps going in a straight line back. I just thought that was a really funny bit that they did.
Yeah, they had great little moments like that, just little things here and there that just kind of added to the overall fun and humor to this whole movie. So outside of that, are there any questions you have that I may be able to answer as far as maybe some of the more D&D aspects of it? That you might have been confused about or didn't understand completely or just would like a further explanation, with the wizards and sorcerers or any of the race stuff? Or do you think the movie did a good enough job of explaining some of that?
I think it did do a good enough job for the most part with that. My only thing too, though, is with the paladin also. I mean, what is technically his main ability?
Well, main ability, I don't know if there's any one thing you can define with that. Paladins are more or less religious knights or knights of an oath.
Okay.
Most of them have an oath to a god or to a construct. Maybe it's an oath of revenge. Isn't always necessarily tied to a deity. But more often than not, it's the idea of seeking justice or seeking redemption or seeking revenge or seeking protection, those types of things. Essentially, it's like a knight with a supreme purpose to it, if you will. So in this, his whole thing is more or less justice, or for a while he plays himself off of a paladin with an oath of redemption. Mm-hmm. He's just saving people and helping people,
right?
Not necessarily being and that's the thing too, is not even necessarily being violent. An oath of redemption typically requires you not to be violent, or if you are, or if you do anything violent or physical, it's in the means of protecting someone. It was literally the last, the last desperate thing you could do would be to take that type of physical action.
Yeah, and I guess because I was wondering, because mostly when he would go to people and just kind of put his hand on whatever it was, not even have to say anything, and it just either calmed them down or he got them to do what they should do with just him laying his hand on them. So I didn't know what that was supposed to be.
That could be a protection from good and evil type of thing.
Okay.
Or I don't want to say bardic inspiration, but maybe like a calming aura. Like a lot of paladins have auras to
Okay.
them, you know. So it could have been like an aura of protection or an aura, you know, something like that, to where just his in general presence,
Mm-hmm.
you know, adds to your protection stats or anything like that. And they're kind of just playing it like that.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, I just didn't know if it was like this. He's just a deep empath, or if it was like he's telekinetically speaking to them while he has his hands on them or something. So I just was wondering what that specifically was with his character.
Which is funny because that is something some people can do. There's the ability to like, I want to say it's even called message in some instances, where essentially you can like, if you have that ability, you know, anybody in your eyesight, as long as they're willing to, you can talk to them mentally.
Okay.
And things like that. And, you know, see, like with some of the stuff that I really appreciated, like they kind of showed that Justice Smith's character was kind of limited in how many spells he could do or what he could do and stuff like that, because that's very accurate to a sorcerer. Sorcerers don't have that many spell slots. They can't actually do that many different types of spells. But
okay,
the spells they can do, they're typically stronger at those spells if they're the ones that they can do.
Okay.
And so with him, you know, and plus, so like little things with it, sorcerers get their magic through their bloodline. So that's why it was a very big deal that his like great grandfather or his grandfather was also a powerful sorcerer. That means the magic's in the bloodline. Whereas the Red Wizards get their magic through spell books and learning spells. They have the most spell slots. You know, they can just learn spells. There's not a warlock in this movie. Warlocks, though, typically get their powers from like an oath of fealty to a patron. So essentially, like a warlock, the easiest example of a warlock is somebody selling their soul to a devil for magic. They're getting that from a patron of magic. And that's how they get theirs. Not all, like, that's just an example, like a type of thing that you can do to become a warlock.
So would it be possible for a sorcerer to also learn spells?
Well, they can, like, how do you say this? Like, you get spells, like you get those spells, but like they've got a very finite amount. Like the amount of spells they can learn is less. Because typically it's like what's inherent to their bloodline type of scenario.
Okay. So they're learning spells, but they're only learning specific spells.
Well, ish, yeah. It's like the ones they're going to be better at are the ones that are inherent to them. You know? Whereas like wizards can have a huge variety. There's lots of different variety in wizards. Whereas sorcerers, there's not as much variety. It's just there's something typically in your bloodline that dictates it. And, you know, so the ones that your bloodline is strong with, or the types of magic that your bloodline is strong with, those are the ones you learn. Because those are the ones you're going to be able to do. They don't completely go into that in this, but like, that's like why he kind of has like that little wheel thing to like, those are more or less what spells he has. And he's got like a little variety because like, you know, they were more or less thieving, you know? So he's got spells that are very inherent to that. I kind of wish they'd shown Michelle Rodriguez's character going into an actual rage, like specifically going into a rage. Because that's a very barbarian-esque trait, is them going into rages. Like I said, I wish they played more into the druid character being, like, playing into her being a tiefling. Because, like, tieflings are essentially, they're, like, infernal born or half infernal born, which is, there's some sort of demon or devil in their bloodline or something like that. So a tiefling is essentially like half devil, half human, or you can be multiple types of tiefling. It doesn't have to be human, I should say. But it kind of goes into more of like, sometimes it's because your family in the past made a deal with an infernal being, like a demon or a devil. And so therefore it'd be like, yeah, at some point in your bloodline, there's going to be a tiefling,
Okay.
or it could be that one of your parents slept with one and you are
Sure.
literally part demon. It's not the
Okay.
magic part of it. It's literally, it's a part of your direct lineage. So, and like, that's why, like, you can randomly, like, get cursed. It could have been like her great, 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 great grandparents made an infernal deal. And then all of a sudden she's born a tiefling and that's why she's outcast.
Okay.
And that's why is because either her mom slept with the devil or someone made a devil pact and she's more or less like, they view it as a curse at that point. When it has
Okay.
nothing to do with them. They are not really a part of any of it. It's just, that's what they're dealt at that point.
Right.
So,
that actually go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just saying that, like, that's a very common thing with tieflings, that they end up being
Okay.
outcasts.
Something you said reminded me of the other thing I was going to talk about that I thought was a little flawed. So in the scene when they go to that graveyard or whatever it is to dig up the bodies and talk to them and ask them the questions, it was a funny bit for the first one when they asked the 5 questions and then essentially the guy's just answering all the questions that are there because whether they're directed at him or not. It's a funny bit. My thing is with any of the other bodies though, when they're asking questions to each other around it, they don't do that. And I was like, come on, that would have been, because the one guy was waiting. He's like, okay, you have 3 more questions or whatever it was. And it's like, but the other guy heard everything else that was being said, all the other questions. So I just thought it was funny that they just didn't do that with every one of them.
Yeah, that's one of those weird inconsistencies that happen sometimes. Like,
which wouldn't be a big deal, except that they kind of made it a big deal with the first one because it was supposed to be like the funny bit of them doing it wrong. And then it just didn't matter after that. I just thought that was like, it could have been better done, I think.
One of the things I would chalk that up to is like kind of the inconsistencies that would happen in a D&D game. So if you had like a dungeon master that was kind of being a dick or playing a joke on you, and like you ask another player at the board, like, hey, how many questions is that? And the DM answers for you to fuck with you. It'd be like, oh, you just used one of yours.
Okay.
But then maybe if you're doing it again, they're like, okay, the story actually needs to progress. I can't keep being a dick.
Okay.
I'm going to ignore it. It's that type of, and I wouldn't necessarily say inconsistency, but just narrative fluidity.
Okay.
That can exist in a D&D game. Like a D, like they might, you might try to do something and they allow it in one battle, but you try to do the same thing in another. And they're like, no, we're not doing that again. Like it was really cool last time. You're not doing it again.
Okay.
Like,
fair enough. I just was like, oh no, they should have just done like, it was a humorous part. So I was like, oh no, they just didn't carry it on with the others.
And that actually could just legitimately be a plot hole.
Yeah.
But like, to me, that's how it played off to me, was that type of inconsistency. Or like I said, where, yeah, your dungeon master might play a joke on you or just be a dick for a little bit just to fuck with you. But then like at a certain point, you're like, I need to move the story forward at this point. I can't keep being a dick, or we're just going to sit around for 4 hours for them to find out the information they need. So I'm just going to stop.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, you got any more thoughts about this here D&D movie?
Oh, really quick. The visuals that I was talking about that I enjoyed.
What is it with you and forgetting about the visuals?
I know. I just thought there was especially when they do like the still motion shots in this, I thought they were really well done. Like even at the beginning when they're breaking the glass to steal the jewelry that's inside, and you just kind of see a slow motion of the glass breaking against the jewels, and the part when the druid, I'm forgetting her name, when she's like, okay, I'm going to go in and pull you through, and everybody's frozen or in slow motion and whatever. All of those shots were just really cool. I just really like how they did those, and all of the shots when she's actually going through all the rooms and she's becoming all the different creatures to get in and out of places. Just the cool aerial shots they do of that, or just the following her as whatever creature she is shots. So I don't know. It was just really impressive. I really liked those aspects of the film too.
To be more specific, the characters were trapped in a gelatinous cube.
Yes, that
is
thing.
a type of monster in D&D.
Okay, so it's considered a monster. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, it eats you.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, that's what it is. That's why it kind of burns a little bit. It's eating you.
Because it's eating you. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then like they have the treasure chest thing, the mimic. And then I can't remember what that panther thing's called. It's like a duplicate or something like that. Essentially, the whole like making a duplicate of itself to distract you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also in that scene,
cool.
that little tournament scene, that other group that's there. Those costumes and those characters are based on the D&D cartoon from the 80s.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You talking about the ones that are like trapped in that little thing?
Part of it, yeah. In the cage at the end and stuff.
Yeah.
But like essentially at the very beginning, whenever it's like, and go, and they look over and there's that other group standing there and they start running.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's the D&D party from the 80s.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, the little creatures and things that they run into is really, it's cool. It's an interesting little world they've built. And also shout out to whoever it was that played the Red Wizard. She was really good.
She constantly reminds me of one of the what is it, the Rooney sisters or
I think it's Mara Rooney is who you're thinking of.
Yeah, but it's
the one from the dragon tattoo. Yeah.
Like both the sisters. She just kind of looks like one of them. She's not, see that. But she looks like them.
Yeah, what is her name? Her name is Daisy Head.
I was about to say, it's something weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a white person name.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that was it. I just thought I should mention that.
Now, before we move on, I have to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything about the visuals you want to talk about?
I'm set on the visuals now.
Are you done with the visuals?
I'm done with the visuals.
I'll talk about the visuals now. So, I'm just kidding. You said it. It's fine. Good. They were good. Good visuals.
Yeah.
On that note, are you sure?
I'm sure. I'm done.
No more visual talk?
No more visual talk.
We're going to add that as a segment. Heather's visual segment. So on that note, thank you guys for listening.
No, I'm just kidding.
Killing me. Look at these eyes. Look at these very tired and ragged eyes. You can't do that to me.
I'm kidding.
You are making our YouTube audience have to look at these raggedy ass eyes right now.
You may proceed.
On that note, I'm going to mute you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Cinema Slayers podcast. Check us out on the internet at www.cinemaslayers.com or Cinema Slayers podcast on Facebook, Cinema_Slayers on Twitter and Instagram, Cinema Slayers Pod on TikTok, at Cinema Slayers Pod on YouTube. Shout out to Plug Migo and Mundo Ochoa for our theme song and logos respectively. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your family's friends, and tell your friends' family. And most of all, tell those dear sweet mothers, because dear sweet mothers love
basically every man in this movie. Hugh Grant, Ray J, Chris Pine, all of them.
Justice Smith didn't get that much love, though. I'm not saying he shouldn't. He should get Justice more love.
Smith. He's an attractive guy too. Yeah, Justice Smith as well.
We here at the Cinema Slayers podcast are both pro slut and pro Sydney. I don't think I said that in the last episode.
Uh-oh.
I know. I remembered it like an hour later. I was like, did I say that? And just remember, according to Justin, Moon Knight is the Best Picture winner. Sure, you don't want to talk about the visuals again?
Maybe my visual section should be like after this part, so that it's always just the last thing, you know?
Cinema Slayers.
It's like the after hours of Heather's visual talk.
Like now I'm worried that I'll be like, all right, I'm out. And you're like, well, wait about the visuals real quick. One more thing about the visuals.
And another thing. I'm not even a big, like, let's talk about the visuals a lot type of person, but I don't know. Just in this movie, I wanted to talk about them.
You were like, and another thing, like I did whenever I went through the entire plot of Midsummer.
And another thing. Yeah. Also, I forgot to mention this. I meant to say it earlier. Regé-Jean Page has recently been considered the most handsome man in the world, according to some science thing they did in People magazine.
Probably has something to do with golden ratio and all that shit.
It totally does. Yeah.
They do that all the time with celebrities and models and famous people. They go, golden ratio, they're the most attractive. And don't get me wrong, very attractive man.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not saying that he's unattractive. I just was like, oh, okay. I was curious when I heard that, like what they were basing it off of, but it's fair.
It's totally golden ratio then. It's facial symmetry and golden ratio.
Yeah.
Especially if there's like, oh, the scientific proof. It's exactly what they did. It's not even science, it's math.
I think Michael B. Jordan was like number 2 or 3 on that list too.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
All right, I'm about to say the ending. I'm sure you don't want to talk more.
I'm good.
All right. I'm out.